Okay, so this is the Meta35 website, and you can see that it's a very sort of slick modern website, but the whole point is that they're selling the adapter dongle that allows you to plug the old film cameras into your modern computer using USB to upload your shooting data from the camera and sync it with your photographs that you've scanned yourself or had scanned during processing. Obviously your more recent Mac laptops don't have USB ports, but that's a different story. So this is the website. It's a very sort of standard modern website. You can go and see which cameras are supported in the cameras section. So we have several different makes of camera, Nikon, Minolta, and of course Canon. Camera I have is of course the Nikon F5, and this is a quick look at the stuff the camera records and the suggested data recording level, because the camera has several different ways of recording data. For a quick look at the features, there are videos that you can watch, but yeah, it's very simple. So that's the website. So what you get with the Meta35 is the sort of dongle, which allows you to connect the camera to the computer via USB, because the original Nikon cables were serial and therefore not compatible with modern computers. This is just a pen drive with the software, but it's easier to download the updated software, and it comes with the necessary Nikon style multi-pin connector to actually 3.5mm jack, which goes into the dongle. How this works is similar to the remote release. You plug this into the camera, you screw it in to the thing to stop it coming out. Then you plug the jack into the Meta35, and then you put that into the back of the computer. So this is the interface. It's quite simple. So this is what you get when you immediately start it up. So basically you can import the data from the camera. I've got the camera plugged in and set up, so we'll do that in a moment. There's also camera setup and preferences. So if we take a quick look at preferences, this is just the basic sort of settings that you can do. Remind you to disconnect the camera, whether or not you want to overwrite and delete the existing data, and what to do after. Backups. It automatically backs up the images. I have my own backups, so I untick this. This is on by default. Camera setup is where you set the camera settings, which we'll have a look at in a short while, but let's start by importing the data from the camera and we can see where it goes. So this is where the images will appear when you load them into the image section, and this is where the camera data appears. So let's so when you switch on the camera, it will indicate that it is connected by running the AF motor. So then you can import film. Let's find the data. And it has found one new film. So you do not want, I don't want to delete the data yet, but we'll leave it there. Close. Okay, so it has found the film data. This is the 94th film that the camera has recorded. It was ISO 100 because it was Fuji Provia F, 36 exposures, and this is the actual data. So the 36 frames here. This one has no F number because this was recorded with a manual lens, a 135. Unfortunately, unless you have the MF28 date back, the camera doesn't record the time of shooting, which is a bit of a shame, but that's a limitation of the camera. It wasn't really invented for recording digital images. And we find the images saved on the hard drive. These are from the CD I got when I had the film processed. I don't process my own E6, I process my own black and white, but E6 is a bit too difficult and expensive to process at home for me, so I have them developed by, I think it's Spectrum Photo Labs in Plymouth, and they scan them when they're processed. So I have the saved images here. I click the folder and open. Now, an interesting sort of limitation is that the Meta35 seems to load them in a random order. These are the pictures they are of things I did with my parents in Aberdeenshire. And what you have to do essentially is sort them by file name, if they're in a meaningful file name, order, or sort them by date to make sure they're in the correct shooting order, which the film data is in. So once you've confirmed that they are in the right order, and you have the same number of images as you have film data saved, you can link them together. If for whatever reason, such as you haven't scanned a particular image because it didn't come out and it wasn't worth scanning or something like that, you can request that the particular frame of data is not included, so it's excluded, and that way you can have the same number of images as file frame data, and you won't have the wrong frame data for a particular image. So you have to make sure that you have the right order of images matching the frame order the film was shot in, and the same number of frames. So once you've done that, you can embed the data. So what it's doing now is writing the EXIF data to the EXIF files, which is certainly quicker than doing this manually, and also saves the different data. You can also add your own metadata to the images here. So you can see the image data recorded is given in this area. So the auto exposure mode, in this case it was program, the shutter speed, the aperture, the matrix metering mode, in this case it was matrix, the ISO, and the focal length of the lens. This is obviously only records the focal length of the lens if you're using a AF chipped lens, like an AFD or a IP if you have one of those. So this is a image from the Strathyler distillery in Keith in Aberdeenshire, and you can see this image was taken with 50mm, actually with 50mm 1.8 AFD, f7.1 1/200th of a second. It was a very sunny day. It's another image. If we rotate it counterclockwise to make it the right way up, we can see this was taken with 18mm. This is an 18 to 35mm lens, f6.3, f6.3, 1:160 shutter speed. And here is a picture of a porpoise in Aberdeen Harbour, or Aberdeen Beach rather. You can see the supply boats in the background, and this was taken with a 135 manual focus Nikon lens, and therefore it has not recorded the f-stop or the focal length, because the f5 doesn't record that. If you had an f6, you can enter those parameters as you can with a DSLR, but it has recorded the fact that it was center-weighted metering, because the f5 doesn't have matrix metering with manual focus lenses. So to check what kind of EXIF data is recorded, we'll go into Picasa, open up an image, and we can see that the camera, the shutter speed and aperture has been recorded. And if we open up the EXIF data, we can see the kind of information that is recorded. Camera make, model, the date is the time I imported the information. It doesn't record the date in time unless you have the MF28 back. It does record the shooting data and so let's take a look at the camera setup. So this gives you an opportunity to alter the custom settings of the camera. This is something that you can do on the camera itself, however you only have numeric codes, so you just select using the small LCD at the back of the camera each custom settings from the custom setting menu, but you don't actually have the name of the custom setting in question, so you have to either just memorize them or look in the manual. This gives you the opportunity to edit them knowing what each setting does, and also has a description of the change and what is the default. I generally leave these in the default settings apart from the self-timer release time, which is set by me to 2 seconds rather than 10 seconds, because I generally use it for tripod release when I don't have my remote release with me. 2 seconds is enough for that. In addition to those that you can change on the camera, the Meta35 allows you to alter additional settings which the original Nikon software, the photo secretary software, allowed you to change as well. And these are some of those here. And some of these are not something that you would really need to alter very often. Slower shutter speed for this isn't. These are not really very frequently altered things, but this allows you to change them nevertheless. And you can also load and save preset setting groups if you want to. The camera also allows you to save, I think it's 2 sets of settings in memory, and this allows you to save additional ones. One very useful setting that the software allows you to do is the amount of data saved. There are 3 different settings. So the default is A, which is minimum, and this only saves this much data, and it saves 78 36 exposure rolls. It will save more if some of them are shorter than 36. B mode saves the that. In addition, it saves the date, but that requires the MF28. So this is only really useful if you have the MF28. That saves the data, and it also imprints the date between the frames using the MF28, which is potentially useful. Although if you're scanning the film yourself, it may interfere with the automatic frame detection of the scanner. And this is what I'm using here, which is maximum, and it will save the data listed here without the MF28, because I don't have one. It saves additional data compared to the minimum setting. So I've got mine set to D, which is maximum. Okay, so once you've loaded your data, you can sync it to your saved images, but you can also access the data itself in a database file, which you then can access and sort at leisure, and then you can keep a record of all of the films and frames that you've shot using your camera. And this can be useful, for instance, if you want to keep your a paper record of your films with the negatives. You can use this to print off the shooting data in a table and keep that with the negatives, just in case something happens to your saved images on a hard drive, including all your backups. So to access the data once you've loaded it using Meta35, if you go to your library folder in your user folder on your Mac, there will be a different way of doing it on a a Windows machine, don't have a Windows machine here. So if you go to your library folder and then go to Application Support, find Promote Systems who make the Meta35, and go to Database, you will find a database file which contains all of your film data. So if you select that, I'm not sure if you need to select hidden files as visible, but if you make a copy of that and paste it, for instance, to your desktop for ease of showing it to people, you can open this. Now this is a database file, so you need a database program. You can use MS Access. What I used was something called Datum3, which was a database I got from the App Store for nothing, because I only needed something which allowed me to export the database into Excel format, because that's what I wanted to use to make a table for ease of use. So if we open this database file, Datum3 opens it, and it will we'll upgrade it now, and we can now see all of the film data that has been saved. Now, I only loaded one film from the camera today, but all of the films that were shot with the camera before I loaded into Meta35 and saved as a database before I erased them from the camera, and this is, I believe, all of the frames, all of the films and frames shot with the camera before I owned it. Obviously, because the person didn't have a MF28, I don't know the dates, and obviously there's no actual evidence of what was shot, although I can see what shutter speeds and film speeds were used. So the camera name, the camera shot name are here, the camera number is here, film number, ISO is all saved. And you can view it using standard sort of database practices. This isn't exactly the easiest thing to use if you're not familiar with it, but what I found was the most useful was simply to export this as a Excel file, which you can do. So if you go to the Datum3 file, you can export the database as a different kind of file. So you can use comma separated values, XML, SQL, but what I used was XLS because I happen to have Excel, so I selected frames and film, which is what I wanted to get. Films folder just saves the film number and things like that. The actual frames database holds all of the shooting data. So if we export that, what it will do is it will generate a Excel file of the data. And there it is. So we can now close the database program, and we can open the Excel file. Obviously you can use OpenOffice or its equivalent. Okay, so what you can see is that you have two tabs, one for each set of database, and the useful one really is frames. Film just has the film number and the number of frames and the ISO and so on. Frames contains the actual frame shooting data, so it has the film ID, so that's the number of film, and then the number of frames is in the second column, and it has all the shooting data there. So you can easily find the data that you want to see. This happens to be the film that I shot at the weekend and imported today, and as I set the saving data setting to maximum, it's saved in addition to the shooting data, it's also saved the matrix, or the metering mode and the auto exposure mode as well. the previous user didn't have that set. So you can go to Data, and if you select your header rows, you can filter, and there you can filter, for instance, on a particular film. You can say I wanted to look at film number 94 only. You can filter on the film ID, and now you can see the data for the most recent film shot. You can see the focal length and all the other data, and then you could copy this and put this into put this in a worksheet of its own, and then you could copy this and put it into a Word document or any other kind of document, or you can format this as a table, for instance. Then you could print this and put it with your negatives to keep a record of the exposure data as a hard copy. Right, so in conclusion, this is a very useful addition to your sort of workflow if you use a film camera like a Nikon F5, F100, F6, or a Canon EOS 1V, or one of the Minolta cameras that this works with. And it allows you to essentially record all of the shooting data in the same way that a DSLR does, and that helps you when you're sorting your images, for instance, and it saves you having to worry about recording shutter speeds or aperture numbers if you needed to do that. It essentially, once you had your images, your film scanned, it means that your data is equivalent to what you get, or almost equivalent to what you get with the DSLR. So I would recommend it, mainly for those reasons. Now, one of the downsides, really, or the main downside, is the cost. It is actually quite expensive for what it is. It does come with pretty much everything you need to do the data transfer, including the cable, but it is quite expensive. It's $149, and that's for what it's cheaper than the Nikon, the old Nikon MV1, which was the compact flash card reader, which is the equivalent kind of thing that you would use. So this is the Nikon MV1. I think it's no longer made, and as you can see, this was still quite expensive, and you still needed the Nikon software, although you could probably get the raw data, well, potentially get the raw data in a similar way to what I've shown you, although I don't know that that is the case. So it's cheaper than the official Nikon solution, and is also still available. I don't think this is made anymore. It still says temporary, but I'm not sure that it is going to be replaced. So I got mine from the Meta35 eBay store, and you can see that with the current poor performance of the pound, it's quite expensive to get this imported to the UK. So if you doesn't have an official Meta35 doesn't yet have a distributor outside the US, and certainly not in the UK, so you have to import it direct from the US, and it's $169 or £135. You can see it was $149 on their website, and the delivery is quite steep. From the eBay store it's $50, which is quite a lot, and obviously if you're importing it, you also have to pay VAT and any import duty fees that apply in your country, so that makes it particularly expensive, and by the time I got this it was pretty much £200, which was it's quite a lot for what it is, and certainly is the main downside. It is very easy to use, it's very useful, and really helps your film to digital kind of workflow, but as it currently stands, and if you're outside the US, it is very, very expensive.